Good evening. My name is Randy Nice. I'm going to be presenting on tips for successful transition management. I spent the past 20 years in purchasing supply chain management and the past 15 years specifically on managing complex projects. One of the most difficult situations I am consistently involved in both for employers and clients is the ability to transition a plan in that moving the contents and people from one location to the next. So in this session, we're going to look at how when new buildings are constructed or new additions are added onto, how people lose focus of the importance of designing, planning, articulating, and executing a successful transition from one place to another. Objectives for this presentation are to list the steps to design and plan a transition management plan, to describe establishing and assigning action items to all participants, as well as timelines for task completion, explain executing the transition plan and managing the responsibilities of stakeholders, vendors, and employees from one space to another, and finally describe post-move action items including establishing command center to track internal open items, return of all equipment used in the move, and completing contracts with vendors. Faced with the task of moving from one facility to another, most companies either try to handle everything in-house with current staff or outsource everything to third-party providers. While this might work in some instances, most often it ends up not meeting the client's strategic objectives and costs much more in financial as well as labor commitments than originally planned. With some oversight provided at the executive stakeholder level and advanced planning, a company can lead a successful transition management plan. A company first should create a leadership team who will be the final decision makers for the project. This includes any changes to the original scope, approval of change order forms, normally known as gatekeepers in the industry, and a final sign-off of accepted documents during project closeout. This same team will also be tasked with reviewing proposed transition items, the budgetary implications, and meeting updates with all involved parties. Before any implementation of a transition plan can begin, a responsibility matrix needs to be created for all trades involved to make certain items are not being duplicated or forgot altogether. This is one of the very few chances for the leadership team to correct any deficiencies before each trade starts working on their action plans. Within this responsibility matrix, timelines are established for each trade and regularly scheduled meetings start occurring for each trade, as well as the overall leadership update meetings. Simply stated, if you want to think of building a house, you would not want to have the drywallers in there installing the drywall when the roof is not in place yet, because obviously any inclement weather is going to destroy that. So simply stated, I don't have an example on the screen to look at, but a responsibility matrix basically lists all the tasks on the left-hand side of the ledger, and on the top of the page it lists all the trades. And then as you go down, there's different boxes that are marked so that the trades know who is doing what, because it can be confusing, and I'll give you some examples. I run into a lot of equipment that is normally furniture, but when you get on very large projects, people defer to have it considered as equipment because of the budget that I manage. So if you think of a hospital setting, very often I purchase linen hampers that they put disposable items in. I purchase overbed tables, which are the items that you slide up to eat off of at nighttime if you're a patient in a bed or a stretcher, or you administer some pills, or chairs. A lot of times those are considered capital equipment because a lot of times when I am sourcing things for a new hospital, it can involve hundreds of items, and the budget for the furniture people usually isn't sufficient. So that's just an example on why having a responsibility matrix in the beginning is critical, because each person gets a copy of it and they know if they're working in conjunction with another trade, they know who to talk to, and if something is forgotten, somebody can bring it up early in the planning stages so it isn't a rush at the end. And clearly identifying the scope of the project and start evaluating in-house capabilities as well as upcoming workload is another critical task. There may be items best left to industry professionals to handle versus asking your current employees to perform services, as it may not be part of the core responsibilities of their job, and it may be something that they have a subject matter expert in. Some outside assistance might be needed, however, in reviewing quotes, contractual documents closely. Traditionally, some service providers will normally subcontract portions to other parties, or simply mark up another company's total bid for their management fee without adding value. So when it comes to reviewing contracts, make certain that if you have a specific company who's going to be subcontracting to someone else, that if they're going to offer it as a pass-through, like they're going to do it on their behalf and help you out, they're also not taking a 15 or 20% markup and taking a $10 item and making an $11.50 or $12 item and passing it through to you, when your team could have went directly to that provider and gotten the reduced price. So the key steps in designing and planning a transition management plan on the screen are: clearly identify the statement of work for the project, establish timelines, identify the key decision makers, including ownership, create committees and assemble leads for each, define processes for making changes to the statement of work, and determine what outside help is needed. The example in the previous slide about the hospital, let's use an example to kind of demonstrate some of these key items with the statement of work. Say company A is looking to open a new location in 3 years. It needs to move patients, equipment, and contents. The timeline from today to 3 years in the future is what we're looking at. Then the identification of the owners of the project, the CEO, the CNO, which is the Chief Nursing Officer, President, etc., need to be identified as far as who's going to be the leadership and stakeholder team for this project. The committees are going to be established to cover the construction, IT, equipment, furniture, etc. There's also going to be a committee members who's going to lead them and the frequency of the meetings. For example, in hospitals, a lot of times I have as the equipment person, I'm in joint meetings very frequently. Sometimes it's once a month, then it's usually once a week when it gets closer to the opening stages, where I'm meeting with the heads of the different trades, of the masonry people, the plumbers, electrical, general contractor, also with other colleagues that I'm working with directly on with IT or furniture type equipment, plus the actual department heads of the departments, to notify them when certain items are being installed, updated, tested, so that they can know from certification purposes when it's ready to be used. That's why this whole process, it's lengthy, but proper planning makes it much easier as you put things in motion. Also, there's an overview and change of statement of work, so that when items come up or something changes in complexity or changes in that physical structure, that there's a process so that as you get to the end on budgeting, if some items come in less, sometimes come in more, there's a track record on why things were done and who signed off on it and the benefit to the client for those changes. And prepare budgeting for outside and needed resources. A lot of times the executives who aren't part of the leadership team, people in accounting, the controller, they like to know on a monthly basis and closer on a weekly basis, as there is a certain set of funds that are approved to do this whole project. So on a new hospital, it might cost $200 million, and there's certain buckets that everybody has to manage. And so as it gets closer to being done, as they get closer to keep on releasing the money, certain people that may not be part of the stakeholder team, but they are a critical component of the project, they need to know where we stand on a budget, so that if there's some late minute changes, they know if they can borrow from one bucket and add it to another one to keep the overall project on task, on time, and on budget. Establishing and assigning action items to all participants and timelines for task completions. Within each committee, the project leads need to lay out overview of all work tasks, timelines for completion, and assigning deliverables to each participant. There also needs to be an outline of frequency of meetings, order of proceedings, and roles for each participant, whether that's a timekeeper, scribe, or other assignment of tasks. There also needs to be a complete contact listing of each member, containing their name, title, email address, cell phone, and distribution to all participants, so that each person has the same page to get in touch with other people on the project. The form on the screen is an example where we have, based on the committees, we have a breakdown where the emergency department will be relocating during this time and at this date. There's a review of what piece of equipment are involved in that move. There are going to be meetings that are going to be held, in this case, every Tuesday bi-monthly. The time, it also gives tasks to the different participants on who's doing what, and the listing of the person, what their title is, their cell number, and their email address for all people to refer to. On One good practice I always put in place is about a month prior to the actual go-live date of this transition plan, have a practice walkthrough with all parties. Take notes, the good and bad points, what you observed, and better alternatives to make the process better. Publish and distribute a final document outlining to each person and committee their roles and timelines. And make certain all boxes, crates, labels needed for move are delivered on site and correctly distributed. One of the key items I like to do is prior to a move is actually have a summary list printed for each of the rooms being moved. So if you're moving somebody's office from one location to the next, even if it's from the 10th floor down to the 2nd floor, I like to have a complete contact list of the person what they're starting with in room 10 in this example and what they're winding up in, and also put it on their walls in their current locations. So as pieces move independently with different people, hopefully at the end of the day, if they started with 23 unique items in the 10th floor in their room, they wind up with 23 items of their correct items on the 2nd floor. Print concise and clear directions of routes for vehicles involved. That's the best way to get vehicles flowing into the location, out to the location as conveniently as possible. The timelines for all departments involved so that everyone has an interest in the larger project. So even if you're a department like the emergency room, you may work for a different part of the building like surgery that's not directly moving with the emergency room, but you may have either personnel or equipment that is involved in there. So having an understanding on what's going on around you benefits everyone on the property. And also the most important thing is place directional signage at all locations to assist the people moving. Sometimes you get to an unfamiliar location, just coming off the elevator through a loading dock or a set of doors that you're not familiar with, you may not know the most direct route. And if everybody kind of goes the same way, there's going to be a big bottleneck. So if you can distribute people accordingly through different routes, it makes the whole process flow much better. Move has taken place, hopefully somewhat successfully. Have a command center established in order to have a single point of contact at the new location where people can come to for missing file cabinets. If they have the crate that is marked for somebody else's room, it's just a good gathering place, a central location place that everybody can come to with papers to fill out so they can identify to the people, here's what I'm missing or here's what I have that doesn't belong to me. So it's all important because there is a lot of chaos, and so it's a good structure to have in place, and a very uniform manner is have the associates know exactly where it is and how to fill things out and the timeline for getting back to them with their answer. And also let all associates know to please leave the items where they're placed and not try to customize their solution. Very oftentimes people get into the new environment and then think that they want to do things in a different way. Please keep in mind there were usually hundreds of meetings, thousands of eyes on this project, and so the why things were placed where they were supposed to be placed, there's reasons behind it. So before you start customizing it to best fit your needs, work with it for a couple of days. If it doesn't work for you, put on a piece of paper why, because oftentimes too, if you bring another trade in to do something, if you need to move some safes or file cabinets that are very heavy, it's better to bring the vendor in to do all those types of moves throughout the company, not just your particular move, because it can be very costly and time consuming. The physical move, have staff allocated to assist on questions that arise versus trying to perform their regular job. Establish a check and balance system with respect to having tagged moved items physically checked when arriving at destination to make sure that they're there and correctly inventoried and have the records updated to where the new location is versus where it was previously. Have correct parties, whether that's the lab, biomed vendor in a hospital type setting, perform system checks on equipment to validate that they're okay, that they're functioning, and they can be placed back in service at the new location. New facilities or expansion additions do not occur overnight, but rather take years or even decades to occur. So the planning and raising funds and final designs all involve communication and input from others. Yet the process should not stop simply because the project has been approved. Rather, continuous discussions concerning the transition management plan should occur, and timelines should be measured against those of the project and the planned opening date to make certain everyone is working on the same page. And my final thoughts are, I've been very privileged in my lifetime to work on over 1,400 projects. Not one of them has ever come off without a hitch. And so no matter, you can take all these steps that I've outlined, and I promise you, probably like getting on the golf course and trying to get a hole in one, going bowling and getting 300, You probably won't get it done correctly, but you'll eliminate hopefully some opportunities that could trip people up, and then you can focus your efforts on those small issues that arise to get them resolved in a more timely manner. Thank you very much for your time.